So my water elemental surged out of the well and it grappled the wizard. Then I described the creature beginning to drag the wizard down into the water where he would surely drown. The fighter's player asked me, can I use a reaction to grab the wizard so the elemental can't drag him away? I thought for a moment and then said, no, that's not something a reaction can be used for. I'm sorry. And then the water elemental dragged the wizard on down the well. No, of course, rules as written, I was 100% correct. However, at the same time, I was 100% wrong. Hello folks, welcome to the DM Lair. I'm Luke Hart, and on this channel I share my nearly 30 years of Game Master experience so that you can run amazing games that your players will love. Look, no one wants to admit that they've failed. Human nature is to either justify ourselves or blame someone else. However, we all know that we screw up, sometimes quite a bit. So today we're talking about what I consider to be my top 7 biggest failures as a game master. These are the things I regret the most and I wish I had done differently. Interdimensional portals have appeared the world over. Vicious monsters have begun to pour forth, but opportunistic heroes, that's you, stand in their way. Known as dungeon drifters, everyday men and women delve into the lairs of these foul creatures in search of fame, fortune, and as much loot as their greedy hands can carry. That's right, our Dungeon Drifters Kickstarter launches today at 12 p.m. Eastern. My team and I have been designing this board game for some time now, and I really think you're going to love it. And if you back in the first 72 hours, we have some very special loot for you. Dungeon Drifters is the competitive dungeon exploration game where opportunistic heroes race to defeat enemies, pocket the most loot, and escape the dungeon first. The base game includes 46 full-color, double-sided acrylic standee miniatures, over 100 full art playing cards, and gobs of dice. And then of course there are expansions for those who want it all. Click the link below to back Dungeon Drifters now. And don't forget, if you back in the first 72 hours, you'll get a free mini Varith the Fallen included with your pledge. Raid, pillage, and conquer. Plunder the dungeon for all it's worth with Dungeon Drifters. Saying no to my players is probably my #1 regret. Now to be clear, I don't believe a dungeon master should always say yes or some variation of it such as yes but. I firmly believe there is a time and a place for saying no. However, there have been times when I've said no, such as in the opening example I gave you, that I regret. Now what I try to do before I say no to something a player wishes to do is I ask myself, why shouldn't they be allowed to do this? Is it that big of a deal? Does it ruin the game? And I try to be a little bit more relaxed about it, at least nowadays. So often when a player wants to do something, I'll ask, okay, can you explain how your character would do that? Then, if the player can give a reasonable explanation, I'll often roll with it. If the request was outlandish to begin with, the player will usually admit that and withdraw their request. It's a very elegant solution, in my opinion. I once had a hardcore power gamer cheating in a game. He would do things like hide his dice rolls behind a screen of energy drinks and books, and then magically always roll above a 15. It was uncanny. He would misrepresent what his character's abilities were, saying, for instance, that his monk could shadow step to any space within range, but that he didn't need to see where he was going. Of course, when I look the ability up, it explicitly says, and I quote, "to any space within range you can see," end quote. And those are just examples. He was the classic power gamer, seeking to find an advantage wherever he could, argue over rules, and even cheat. He took it way too far, much to the detriment of the group. Now, eventually he left the game, but my biggest regret is that I didn't remove him sooner. I've only ever had to remove, I think, maybe 3 players from my games in the decades I've been playing. But every time I've done so, I've had the same thought. Why didn't I do this sooner? You see, after removing a problem player, our next game sessions have been spectacular. It's like a weight has been removed from our shoulders and we're no longer being suffocated. As a result, I'm now much quicker to correct players when they exhibit problematic behaviors, and I'm much quicker to remove them from the game. The 2014 D&D 5e Warlock's Eldritch Blast has this pushback effect that can be added to it, and I once had a player take it. When he started using it at the game table, I was dismayed that there was no saving throw and that my monsters could basically be knocked back up to 15 feet away every round. It could be a huge dragon. It doesn't matter. Knocked back. So I house rule that monsters get a strength saving throw versus the Warlock's spell save DC to resist the pushback. That player left the game either the next session or the one after. In the same campaign, I placed a CR-17 Dragon Turtle in an adventure designed for level 7 characters. They of course stood no chance against the monster, and they knew it, but they decided to take it on anyway so that they could snag some treasure from its hoard. And through clever gameplay, they somehow managed to not only survive the encounter, but get a few pieces of treasure. The Dragon Turtle was still alive, of course, and supremely angry, but my players accomplished their objective. Actually, I think that Dragon Turtle hired mercenaries later on in the campaign to go after the adventurers and try to get its treasure back. Because Dragon Turtles aren't stupid, they're very smart. And, you know, hire mercenaries, sure, that sounds great. Anyway, I think one of my failures as a game master has been worrying too much about balance. Is a character's ability too strong? Is this spell too much? Does X, Y, or Z break the game? I'm playing Shadowdark right now, and one of the things I love is characters often run into monsters that clean their clocks, or their abilities or spells sometimes allow them to trounce what should have been a hard fight. It's kind of cool, actually. And some of the best stories in my games have resulted from a lack of balance. So these days, I try to be more relaxed about balance in my games and just enjoy the journey. By the way, if you're finding this information useful, please give me a thumbs up and share this video with a fellow game master. And if you're not already subscribed to my channel, screw it, who cares? Subscriptions don't matter anyway. Just watch the video and leave a comment and whatever, and we're all happy around here, aren't we? No, but now a bunch of people are unsubscribing. It's like, no, that's not what I meant. You're twisting my words. Luke went from 170-some thousand subscribers to under 100 in a single day because he dared his audience. I'm not very smart at times. Back to the power gamer, the cheater. He would often really get under my skin. The constant attempts to gain an advantage, the constant rules arguments, and he would upset me. I'd lose my cool. I would give angry retorts. I wouldn't always treat him respectfully. Now, I might try to justify that by saying he was asking for it, that it was his own fault, but as a Christian, I strive to be better than that, and as just like a decent human being, I suppose. So losing my temper with players is definitely one of my top regrets, and it's still hard, believe me, because I'm a hothead. And you know, sometimes the illogical arguments or reasonings that players try to slip by their game masters, yeah, it's hard. But I don't want to be the angry game master because that's not cool. When the OGL scandal happened, you know, when Wizards of the Coast tried to change their SRD licensing rules to force third-party publishers out of the space, out of business, essentially, I, along with many others in the D&D community, were irate. Of course, some didn't really say anything because they probably had business deals with Wizards of the Coast, and but let's just not talk about that, shall we? Anyway, that single move by Wizards caused a mass exodus where gamers left behind D&D and tried other games such as Pathfinder 2 or Shadowdark. It also sparked many creators to create their own new game systems. Witness MCDM's Draw Steel, Critical Role's Daggerheart, Dungeon Coach's DC-20. I personally started playing Pathfinder 2 and more recently Shadowdark, and I've been loving learning new game systems and experiencing different ways to play. It's made me a stronger game master overall, whether I'm running D&D, which I still do, or something else, and it's been tons of fun. So my failure, or a regret at the very least, is not expanding my horizon and my experience with other game systems sooner. I think I would have personally had more fun, and of course it would have made me a better game master faster. In my Sword Coast Guard campaign, Lord Paxton was the big bad of the entire campaign. He was the evil mastermind behind every horrible thing going on in the region. I built the nemesis of Lord Paxton up over about 2 years, give or take. My players knew that eventually they would face him, and they knew that he was powerful. Eventually, they discovered that he was an ascended storm giant, essentially a demigod. And then, when they finally confronted Lord Paxton in the campaign finale, the final battle for all the marbles, Lord Paxton was a big letdown, a flop, a failure. Contrast that with the Tiamat fight in my Hands of Light campaign. Now that fight was amazing. The environment was shifting around from the interior of a volcano to a swamp to a bleak frozen landscape. Tiamat and her minions were really giving the players a run for their money. And the final killing blow was delivered when a barbarian who had literally been swallowed by Tiamat cut his way through her innards, and chopped his way out of her chest. That, my friends, was a cool final boss fight. So I feel like there have been times when I didn't do a good enough job of crafting boss fights. Fights that my players were really looking forward to. I didn't spend enough time making sure that they checked all the boxes of things that I know I'm supposed to do, things that I literally make videos about. It's easy to justify it by saying I didn't have enough time, and it is kind of true. I am super busy with the business and multiple games I run, but it doesn't take away the sting of a final boss fight that falls flat. It just doesn't. Now, most of my games are characterized by what I call dungeons. These can be castles or sewers or actual dungeons, but they're just an enclosed location that has rooms and hallways connecting them. The defining characteristic of almost any of my games is that you as a player will be delving into these locations, these dungeons, and there will be equal parts exploration, social interactions, and encounters. So it hits all three pillars of gameplay. But most of the adventure does occur in dungeons. That's just how I learned to run games back in high school, and it's been the sort of games I've enjoyed the most when I've been a player. However, it's turned me into a one-trick pony, I think. I'll often hear game masters describing how they run their games, and I'm often struck by how different their games are from mine. Now, sometimes I think, nah, I wouldn't want to play that way. But many other times I think, holy crap, that sounds really cool. So I think I've missed out by not experimenting more with the style of game that I run. For instance, I recently had Harmony Ginger on a live stream talking about one-to-one timekeeping and Brownstein campaigns and her Godstein campaign style, and I think trying things like that would be amazing. My goal is to do that sort of thing, try new ways of running games when I can. It's hard because I am super busy and I can only run so many games at once, but I'm making this my goal at least. Take me in a year to see if I'm still a failure in this regard or not, I suppose. Now, I know I've failed way more times than just 7, but those are the things that came to mind first. If you feel comfortable, please tell me about your biggest failures as a dungeon master in the comments below. And don't forget to back our Dungeon Drifters board game on Kickstarter within the first 72 hours to get a free mini, Vareth the Fallen, included with your pledge. Now, if you'd like to learn how to run political intrigue adventures, click right here. And until next time, happy game mastering.